Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Featherstone here, Pancakes and Power Slam Show. Of course, as I said before, this is great. This is an awesome interview for tonight's episode 371, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is a great night for me as a journalist, but as a wrestling fan. I've interviewed many people, many Hall of Famers. I think maybe 10 now from WWE, and I love professional wrestling. I love the business, but you get your bucket list items every now and then. And as a journalist, there's a few people that I wanted to interview. Two of those people I've interviewed, and this person makes three. There's a couple more, but this person makes three, and it's funny because this person is also in my top three favorite pro wrestlers of all time. I've said this many times. A lot of people know my list, and he's in the top three. And I've been watching wrestling for over 30 years now. And this person is just probably, I say, the best pure babyface in pro wrestling history. One of the most fluid wrestlers. Accolade after accolade, you know who he is. I don't have to say too much about him as far as who he is, but I'm so glad that he's on the show tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the man, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. How are you tonight, sir?
Hey, Chris, you know something? Let me say this. That was the best intro that I've ever had.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
That was the best intro I've ever had.
Wow. You've interviewed a lot in your career, so that's a lot.
Who are the other two guys from your top list?
Yeah, well, I'll give you my top five. Number 5 is Booker T. Number 4 is Chris Jericho. Number 3 is you. Number 2 is Dusty Rhodes, and number 1 is Sting.
Oh,
yep, those are my top 5 right there. Been in my top 5 for probably 20 years to 15 years now. Yes, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it as far as my favorites. I don't think that top 5 will ever be broken. It's been the top 5 for a while, and I don't think it'll ever go away, because especially you, Dusty, and Sting. I just, you three, I was an NWA guy growing up. I like WWE, but I grew up in the 80s and 90s, early 90s. And I started watching wrestling around 85. I would say probably 85, 84. Well, you were mostly WWE in the mid 80s. Well, you're a WWE, NWA, feuding with, teaming with Youngblood, feuding with Flair of the U.S. title. And then, you had your little WWE run. And then, of course, going back to the NWA, WCW, winning the championship in 89. And so a lot of the 80s wrestling, although I watched both, there was something about the NWA that really hooked me, because I was just having this conversation last week. WWE came to my hometown last week for SmackDown, and beforehand a bunch of us just fellowship and just talked old school wrestling and over some wings or something like that. And so we were talking. I was just like, there was something about old school NWA that just really hooked me, because you actually had someone compete in a match and walk over a few steps to a podium and then plug their match, plug their brand, and then, cut a scathing promo against their nemesis, and give us such a cliffhanger of what town to come to, whatever weekend it is. This Saturday in Evansville, you better come, because I'm going to take you down. There was such an amazing draw to me as a fan, because I think the art of the cliffhanger is something that's kind of been missing for a while, and I really love that about the NWA.
Yeah, not only with cliffhangers, but I think the guys that worked in the NWA were head and shoulders above other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in the NWA, I was brought up in the NWA. Actually, I started with Vern in AWA, but that was just a short run, and then spent so many years doing NWA until late '84 and the beginning of '85, and then I went up to when there was the WWF at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But does anybody know the story of the transition? Why I went from NWA to WWF?
I've heard of it, but for those who are listening, maybe they've never heard it. So go for it.
Well, Dusty Rhodes came in as the booker for Croc. Is this the story you heard?
Yep. Yep.
And he was still working, of course, in top babyface. It was top babyface in the Crockett Mid-Atlantic. And he was the guy with the pencil and just using me to make heels look good for him to take the heel after I've had a run and then beat him.
Mm-hmm.
And that started with Tully Blanchard. Now, I enjoyed working with Tully. And, he was the TV champion, and at that time, even though the main event match was 60 minutes, the TV championship was only up for the first 10.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd have our match, and I would beat him in 15 minutes, and I would win the match, and he'd go home with the belt. And then we'd get on TV, the time limit extended to 20 minutes, and I'd beat him in 22. I'd win the match, but he'd go home with the belt. And we went around the territory, both North and South Carolina and Virginia, for a couple of months like that. And then we had a big show in Greensboro, and Dusty booked himself with Tully, went out there and beat him in 8 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I found out, I was being hooked up with Nikita Koloff when Nikita was just very green, very, very green. And we were going to do an angle on TV, and he gave me a clothesline from behind. And I think my head went into the upper bleachers.
Mm.
And, it wasn't too long after that, I just went into Jim Crockett. I said, I've been here, I think about 8 years, and I think it's just time for a move. I didn't put any heat on Dusty. I didn't say the reasons or nothing. I just said, look, I've been here for so long, it's time for me to make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I made my move. But 20 years later, maybe 25 years later, when I was working at NXT in Tampa, Dusty was also working there. I finally had a talk with Dusty. He brought up the fact that when he was booking and that I left him. I said, no. I told him the story. I said, you're the booker, and using me, I was a top babyface, and you being a top babyface, so I just thought it's best to make a move. And I looked at Dusty, and I said, for over 20, 25 years, I had a gentle feeling about you, but I'm telling you right now that I'm going to thank you for it. And the reason being is that when I left and went to the WWF at that time, it took Ricky Steamboat to another level.
It did.
It did. And after all these years, I'm just want to say thank you for, I understand your position. You're the booker, and you've got to make things happen and make things work. I was there for a long time, 8 years, and working for Crockett. But the ill feeling is gone, and I owe you a big debt of gratitude.
Wow.
And he just,
wow. And he said what?
He didn't hardly say anything. Just looked at me and gave me a nod and a smile, and we shook hands. And then we, went back to work at the NXT school, FCW.
Wow. That's really interesting. A lot of respect, to you for that. I didn't know that. Now, I knew that there was some conflict between you and Dusty as far as the booking. I didn't know about the Nikita part, and I didn't know about the bearing the hatchet, so to speak. So that's really, really interesting.
Well, that's new news to you, right?
It is, and I love to hear new stuff. Yeah, it is.
With Nikita was, the Russian, right?
Yeah.
And And the writing on the wall that I saw was, here you got the American Dream and the red, white, and blue going to eventually work the main events with the Russian.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's what he did.
Yeah, they ended up teaming together too. They won the Crockett Cup too, if I'm not mistaken, for 1 year. The Superpowers, I believe they were. Yeah, really, really interesting. And this is one other thing that I don't think I ever knew, but I was really interested about. I know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, because the running story is that your WWE run halted because you wanted to concentrate more on spending time with your family. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Well, give me the real.
Okay. We did the angle in December of '86 with me and Savage, with him coming off the top rope on my throat with the announcer's bell.
Mm-hmm.
And leading up to that, I gave word to the office that my wife at the time, Bonnie, was pregnant, and my firstborn was going to be somewhere around first week of July.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I'd like to have either the week before and the week after off, 2 weeks, because I want to be there for my firstborn. You know, Chris, at those days, we were doing 300 shows a year. You know,
yep.
And traveling all over the country, and just wanted to be sure that I wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Who would not want to be there with their firstborn, right?
Right.
You know, I was in my mid-30s, and Savage and I had our match, one of my all-time favorites, and I think I know we took the Intercontinental belt to another level.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely,
politics as it may be, Vince just said we can't leave the belt dormant for those couple of weeks that you want away. And he said, I'd like for you to drop it to Wayne, Honky Tonk.
Yeah, yep. Yep.
Well, who brought Honky Tonk in?
I don't know. That's a good question. Did you bring him? No.
Hulk Hogan.
Who
suggested to Vince to drop the belt to Honky Tonk?
Hogan.
Hulk Hogan. And this news, this comes from a live interview that I saw Honky Tonk do and say that.
Very interesting. And what are your thoughts on, he's the longest Intercontinental Champion of all time. Do you think that Hogan had some stroke in keeping the title on him?
I don't know anything about that, honestly. But you know what's funny is that I had the belt about 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do appearances and I do Q&As, room full of fans, and I've done a ton of them. I started doing it in the last 6-7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you the truth. Why is his name never brought up?
You talking about Honky Tonk Man's?
Yeah.
That is really interesting. Well, he only had one. I mean, he was the longest Intercontinental Champion of all time. He only had one run. So I don't know if someone would consider him the greatest. I think he's Hall of Fame worthy, and I think him being in Hall of Fame, makes sense. But some people, if you're kind of like a one and done, just because you had a long reign doesn't necessarily mean that, you're one of the greatest. Like, for instance, JBL was, before AJ Styles, JBL was the longest reigning world champ in SmackDown history, right? He had it over a year or around there. And he's not considered one of the greatest, even in the top 5 or 10. I mean, he had a really good run as a heel, but he's not considered the greatest because he had the longest reign.
Yeah, well, JBL, talking real quick, I enjoy watching him work. And I especially enjoy his interviews, his promos.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Yep. Yeah. He's that, Texas blood off the cuff, old school type of promo for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's
good.
Interesting. Yeah, he is. I agree. I think his promos are really good. Well,
you know what would be enriching? If some guy would go out there and start doing promos like old school.
Oh, it would be very enriching for me as a fan. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and it certainly would get the nod from all the old school fans, but certainly I think the new school fans would dig on it also.
I agree. Yeah, because things feel so fabricated when it comes to promos, and promos is what hooked me. So I'm a promo guy. I love hearing good, authentic promos. Like for instance, you talk about Nikita. This guy was so engulfed in his character that he started to talk like he was like really Russian. You know what I mean? Like I loved that, and just someone like you. It's interesting because I think someone like you really transcended what we see today. But I think that the scope now is a little bit too much of what you started. You, like for instance, I think the WrestleMania 3 match between you and Savage, it was so athletic that we see a lot of the in-ring action concentration today. But the difference between the difference between then and now, especially me watching both, I watched WrestleMania 3 and just nowadays, is that there was a story behind you and Savage. Now you just throw two people together in the ring and they just you break a leg, or risk injury. To me, that doesn't, as a fan, that doesn't mean too much because there's no story behind it. If you just throw two people in the ring, I'm not really intrigued. I mean, the match will be good, but there's no lasting impression. WrestleMania 3 was 22 years ago. You know what I mean? And it's still a lasting impression because not only because the match was amazing, that because you mentioned him, lacerating your throat, with the ring bell. There was a story behind it, and I always say, behind every good face, there's a good heel. You know what I mean? In order to make a good baby face, you have to have a really good heel. And I think Savage did that part. What are your thoughts on just the dynamic of faces and heels nowadays? And like I said, that was such a story, and there was a really good heel to make a really good baby face. Now the lines are so blurred, and you got one half of the arena chanting cheering and the other half booing, the heels getting cheered. The lines are so blurred nowadays and doesn't really cause much excitement about the coming weeks.
Well, I saw the change in the late 80s. The fans started to, with Ric Flair starting to hooray him instead of booing him like 5 years earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And this is my thought on it. As fans were getting smarter to the business, and the ones that started hurraying the heels, it's because they hooray, even though the guy worked as a heel, if it looks like a duck, smells like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. But a guy would work and talk like a heel, but your fans, as they were getting smarter, and I'm saying late 80s through early 90s, mm-hmm. they started hurraying the heels. Why? Because they said, that guy entertains me.
Yeah.
Bottom line, I understand that he has a role to play. He has a character that he has to fulfill. But bottom line is, that guy entertains me, and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And good heels can entertain the heck out of you.
Mm. They can. You're right about that. What do you think a modern day heel can do to get back to the point of being a heel, which is to get all the heat, and put a babyface over by pinning this huge heat magnet? This person's oozing heat, and they make a bigger babyface by the babyface getting the comeuppance and the final the final hurrah. That's really a lot of just an old school method. That's what really makes the baby faces. Like for instance, you and Flair was feuding 10 years before people knew about your big '89 title reign. You're feuding a long time, but there was something about the heelness of Ric Flair and the Horsemen and things like that, and you were the babyface. You were the quintessential good guy, family man. Didn't say much, didn't really. There was nothing about you that was antagonizing. You had the look, you had the style, you had you just oozing of athleticism, and Flair being the heel is what really helped you on that main event level. What do you think of a heel, or even from a booking standpoint, what do you think that WWE and pro wrestling as a whole can do to really get back to those days of strong baby faces and strong heels?
Well, I see that when you watch a match, one of the things that I think that is missing is that every match has a story, and there's not very much of storytelling going on in the match. A lot of guys do fantastic stuff in the ring, and guys are very athletic, but they're not connecting the dots.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean is, if I started working on a guy's arm and we're doing the Ricky Steamboat arm drags, and then we segue into the heat, and he's starting to get some heat on me, but throughout the heat section, I am finding ways of getting back to that arm.
Mm-hmm.
And then he stops me and we're back in heat. And then we move on and I get back to that arm, and then he stops me and we're back to heat. So we front load it in the beginning, where I established that I've worked on his arm and we've got a wounded wing, and throughout the rest of the story of the match, I paint a picture that I'm trying to get back to it because I know I've heard it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't see a lot of that today. I mean, I see guys go out there and work the head and neck and lower back and the leg and, and ribs and sort of all over the place. But I think fans, when I was working a body part throughout the heat, I would get back to it. They were getting it. Because, they said, oh, yeah, I remember back, 5 minutes ago, he was really tearing that body part up,
Yep.
I don't see heels trying to do stuff behind the referee's back.
Yeah.
There's a lot of blatant stuff that's happening out there right in front of the referee. You know what I mean, Chris? There was heels that would do stuff that were illegal, but they made sure that the referee never saw it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I've been in the locker room in which the heel would walk up to the ref and said, look, I'm going to buy you a six-pack tonight if you catch me one time.
Wow.
And most times than not, that referee would not have the beer.
Mm-hmm. That's
Simple
a good point.
stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, just not even giving the fans a reason to boo you. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
yeah. If you're just as good, if you're looking like the babyface in the ring, the babyface is typically the athlete, and the heel is typically the villain. But if both of them are looking a lot alike in the ring, what's the point of booing you?
Well, a lot of times when I don't know guys and I watch, they ask me on a lot of these shows that I go to, they said, Ricky, would you watch our match? I said, sure. I don't know them. And when they come back and they ask me, what did you think? And I said, well, first of all, you need, as much as I know, and I've been in over 6,000 matches, you two guys have to tell me who was good guy, who was bad guy.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I watched the whole match, and I can't tell you who was. Now, if I can't, do you think the fans can?
Right. Exactly.
Tell me who. Then one guy, well, I was the heel, and the other guy, I was the babyface. Oh, you could have fooled me.
Right. That's so true. That's it right there. Absolutely.
You know?
Yep. I 100% agree with that.
Whenever I worked, and it could have been with Flair or young heel that was just coming up, within the first minute or 2 minutes, we established who's good guy, bad guy.
Yep.
Now, as popular as Flair was and me, we still would establish good guy, bad guy.
Yep.
In the first minute.
Yep.
Lock up, push me back in the corner with my hair and slap me. Right?
Yep.
And then the guys would say, well, why would you do that? As popular as you guys were, the main event guys,